It doesn't matter if you have Netflix or not. You've probably heard of House of Cards by now. The Netflix original series was the first to earn a Primetime Emmy nomination for original online-only web television. Since season 2 has been out long enough for you all to have seen it, I thought it was time to talk about the show and its impact on the DC metropolitan area. I'll break down House of Cards season 2 with fellow film critic WTOP's Jason Fraley, talk with Kimberly Skyrme about what it takes to be a casting director and her experience casting for House of Cards, and talk with local actors Lamont and Catalina Parks about their experience on the Underwood Secret Service detail. Ooh, that's all ahead on Picture Lock. By now, you've seen season 2, just like you've seen and heard the man sitting next to me who needs no introduction on this show. WTOP film critic Jason Fraley is in the house to talk about this show that we all enjoy. Jason, welcome back, my man.
Thanks for having me, sir.
You know, it's always a pleasure, as we were talking about before. I mean, this is just fun for us, right?
Well, and it's fun because the first time we came on here, it was your very first episode, and we were talking about All the President's Men, a political thriller, and now we've come full circle. It's great.
We keep doing this, full circle thing. Okay, so obviously we're going to talk about House of Cards. What do you think it is about House of Cards that really has people enthralled with it? Because like I said in the intro, this is online only web television series.
Yeah, that facet of it is what will put it in the history books. Whether the rest of the seasons tank or are incredible, people will be talking about House of Cards because, like you said in the intro, it's the first, Emmy nominated for best TV drama, something that's purely web content. It's the game changer. It's what Facebook did for social media. House of Cards is doing for digital streaming.
Right.
Other series were available on Netflix, but or Amazon Prime, or before House of Cards. But they had a broadcast television component, and this is purely, if you want to watch this, if you want to binge watch this, you have to have Netflix, and it's allowed Netflix to invest in other shows too,
Right.
And now you hear Amazon's doing their original content and things like that too. So from a purely historic technological standpoint, it is on the timeline of TV history, and for that it's great. In terms of the actual show. It is people, especially people in the D.C. area, but it also has nationwide appeal. Love the corruption, watching corruption inside Washington.
Right.
We live in a time when it seems like, no matter what party you're in, it seems like everyone can agree that hardly anything's getting done. It's like factual that it's the least productive, Congress in the last however. So people like to see, a politician, even though it's cutthroat, even kill to get your way, Frank Underwood, Kevin Spacey. People like to see someone that can whip up the votes and pass things. I think that's part of the appeal. And it's almost like the Godfather puppet master appeal with, they have the logo with the marionette and the Godfather. For here, it's the upside down American flag. That shows in the logo, and so it ties into the whole, who's the person pulling the strings, and in this case, it's Frank Underwood. So I think that's why.
Yeah, definitely, man. So you gotta, I love when you come on because you just take it away, Jason. You know what I mean?
You can just sit back and sip your water.
I'll just ask a question and then I'll go. Yeah, but I do think you're right. I think the binge factor plays a huge part of it because the fact that you can just sit there and instead of having to wait for next week, it's a cliffhanger, you just hit enter and you're in the next season. If not, it's going to automatically do it for you. So I think the binge factor definitely has a big thing to do with it. And you were, if memory serves correct, you were at the premiere when House of Cards Season 1 premiered here in D.C. And didn't Kevin Spacey talk to you a little bit about how the whole online television thing was changing the game? What did he have to say to you?
Yeah, it was over at the museum, which is an awesome museum over there.
Oh, yeah.
You can actually kind of see the street view during the opening credits. And yeah, Kevin Spacey was there, Robin Wright was there, got to talk to them all along the red carpet, and but Spacey and actually the creator / writer Beau Willimon were talking about how they actually factored in the binge factor in the creation of the show.
Right.
In terms of Spacey wanted to be on it just because it was revolutionary and he likes pushing the bounds. He's done everything he needs to in movies, from Seven to Usual Suspects, American Beauty.
Right.
So, but in terms of this new creation, the writer-creator Beau Willimon was saying that he had a freedom and a flexibility to kind of game it out long term, because they had a 2-season deal from the start. So he was writing for 26 episodes as opposed to just season 1. We'll see how the ratings do and let the ratings dictate it.
Right.
He had kind of had it mapped out, and you can kind of see that arc in there.
Yeah.
And you'll even notice if you look at the episode titles, it's just chapter 16, chapter 17. It's not, there's no title name like Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, like Mad Men or whatever.
Right,
every episode has a title. It's just new segments in the overall arc.
Yeah. So, all right, before we get into the arc, and it's interesting, like you said, the writer, I think we can definitely see in season 2 kind of how he was writing to get to the last 3 episodes.
Right.
But your opinion, what did you think of season 2?
Season 2 itself. I thought they did, we'll start with the good and then maybe things that I thought might be pushing it. I think they do a great job of weaving in current events in terms of, there's a whole thing about a government shutdown. There's sexual assault in the military, which has been going on here.
Right.
There's this whole subplot of almost like a Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, hacker, NSA type, cyber spying thing going on. There's China rears its head too, in terms of Raymond Tusk orchestrating things behind the scenes. So there are a lot of issues that are going on currently in Washington, similar to the newsroom, except they somehow knock it out every episode. It's like
Right.
Bin Laden was killed, boom, it's done. Oil spill, it's done. House of Cards spreads it out a little more, which I do like.
Yeah.
In terms of things that I'm wondering whether, and this might get a little into the pacing, is I wonder if they're pushing it a little too hard, too fast sometimes. Mm-hmm. Kevin Spacey goes from House Majority Whip to Vice President in 1 season,
Right.
and then from Vice President to President in after 2 seasons.
Yeah.
So I think maybe when the history books are written, that might be what kind of takes it down a peg from Mad Men or some of the shows that kind of are more slower in their pacing. Just because it almost seems like they're rushing it. It's like they must have so many ideas of what they want to do with him as president.
Right.
So let's get to it really fast.
Yeah.
Although we might be thinking that because we're binging it. We see him go to president in 2 weekends, as opposed to if it was over a whole year, it might not seem as fast.
Right.
But be that as it may, we still, even though we can kind of read the tea leaves that, they're going to get to president, it still has us gripped and wanting to find that out, almost like a carrot on the end of the stick. We still want to watch it,
right,
rather than, I know what's going to happen. They still get you hooked.
You know the end result, but it's a matter of how we get there that's interesting. I agree. I mean, for some reason, to me, season 1, I just loved the Russo storyline, and I felt like it was, I don't know if pragmatic, a little bit better in terms of the slow burn to getting to vice president. Versus this time, I kind of did feel more so like, man, we're just trying to get the president here, and there's a lot of filler in between, which I guess we can kind of get into. So let's go ahead and dig into season 2 a little bit.
Okay.
So, and as far as the pacing and overall tone of season 2, what do you think of that? I guess you kind of talked about it just now.
Yeah, the pacing, like we kind of talked about it. It seems almost like they're in a hurry to get it done. And in The Wire, they do catch Avon Barksdale at the end of season 1, but it didn't seem, to me, it didn't seem like we've reached ending point so fast, because it was each season was almost you thought you've solved it. Police detectives? Well, actually, it's the tip of the iceberg, because the Greek is really in charge in season 2. Or the politicians are involved, and every season became a new layer. Here, it's like we're 0 to 60 to the president so fast, and I'm curious to see where they're going to go. I'm not going to totally criticize it yet. But it does feel like they're rushing it a little much. In terms of tone, it seems season 2 is a lot darker, and that's hard to say because they do kill off Russo at the end of season 1. But 2 is off with a bang. Zoe Barnes is in front of that, pushed in front of a metro train, dead right off the bat. So it's almost got that Game of Thrones thing where you feel like anyone can go at any time, which I do like.
Yeah.
But they've definitely built. I miss the Russo subplot too. He was a great character.
Exactly. I felt like, and we'll get into this as well with the supporting characters, but I felt like that was just such a great supporting character, and I felt like he really needed Russo and that whole little chess piece. Like he needed that move, and so you invest a lot more in that. Versus with this one, I did feel like, season 1, the episode 1, once the scene with Zoe Barnes, I can't lie. I usually watch these things at night, and so I was kind of nodding off. But I saw he was talking to Zoe, and then all of a sudden, like, I had to rewind it. I was like, did he really just push?
Happen?
Yeah, and so then I was like wide awake. I'm like,
stay away
oh my
from
goodness.
Cathedral Heights Metro. It doesn't exist, but I'm never going there if they build that one.
Right, exactly. So I think it did get off to a great start. And then I think to develop the overall, like the China plot came in and everything, so it got really slow. But at the same time, you're binging, so you kind of just go ahead and give it the benefit of the doubt. But then once we get to the latter portion, I do feel as though there was some good payoffs, from what happened in the beginning. But definitely, it picks up around episode 9 through 13. Let's talk about the subplots and supporting characters. So Zoe's boyfriend, Lucas Goodwin, I feel like he was more of a filler subplot, and you were talking about this just a little while ago, but just in terms of the whole hacking, I thought it was a horrible use of Jimmy Simpson, who I loved in Breakout Kings. So he's like one of those quirky, like,
petting the cat.
Yeah, character actor. But he became more of a stereotype in this, and in some ways it was kind of like, okay, let's go ahead and get rid of this Lucas character. But like you said, it is a good way to kind of have the current events brought into it. And I do think one of the things, like you mentioned earlier, that I do enjoy is seeing the crooked politics. And it's kind of scary in a sense that you're just like, wow, Frank Underwood has so much power that he can pretty much have this guy disappear.
Kill people.
And like, he did it. Yeah, same thing. I mean, he killed Russo. He can kill whoever he wants to. So
what's the line in The Godfather? Diane Keaton tells Michael Corleone, Al Pacino, she said, "Do you know how naive you sound? Politicians don't have men killed." And he goes, "Who's being naive, Kay?" So it's yeah. But with the subplot with the Lucas Goodwin and the Julian Assange, Ed Snowden type character, petting the cat. I think it's all an extension of the Peter Russo thing. Frank Underwood has to, that's his big sin from season 1. And in order to make the leap to president after doing that, there's 2 pieces he needs to sweep under the rug. One is Zoe Barnes. He offs her right off the bat, kills her. And then Lucas Goodwin, he sets up in this giant, sting. Basically, it turns out that it's an FBI, undercover, and he goes to jail. So he's locked away, at least for now. I'm sure that's a way of getting it off the table, but it'll come back, I'm sure, for a little more All the President's Men type, journalist stuff. But there is that piece of the third journalist, Zoe's friend, that's off up in the Northeast teaching the class. So that's still dangling out there too.
Right.
So I have a feeling her and Lucas will come back in it. But I think what replaced the Peter Russo character, he was kind of like the addict, troubled, drug-induced guy that, that Spacey and his chief of staff, Doug Stamper, that they kind of took advantage to, the chess piece you're talking about. The new one is the prostitute, Rachel.
Right.
She's also like the overcoming her demons in the meetings and the church meetings, and so that's kind of their next, the way they're using her too. Except she as we know, off Stamper in the final scene. And they had that shot when she gets out of the car before she kills him. They had that high angle up by the traffic light. There's got to be a camera on there that caught it. That's my prediction.
That's true.
They're gonna see someone. They're gonna see them flee and find the dead body. And
It could be. At the same time, it seemed like it was rural enough where
Right.
maybe they were out, like
Right.
out in somewhere Maryland, and
But also with Russo, there's another supporting character that I thought they were going to go to more this season, but they didn't at all. He wasn't in the season 2 at all. That hopefully they'll come back to again. Was Russo's his childhood friend from his home district? You remember the Italian guy?
Right. He was
like
cool.
the labor union guy.
Yeah.
His name. He was almost like the Jimmy Stewart, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, like, every man, the pure politics, and then
Right.
Russo went and like kind of lost his way once he was in
Right.
Washington. And the reason I say that is because his character's name, look it up on IMDb, it's Capra.
Really?
Yeah, so there's Mr. Smith right there.
Breaking it down, Jason
Breaking news.
Fraley.
No. So
Nice.
anyway, I thought that maybe that, when I saw that, I was like, oh, he's going to be this everyman, why everyone actually got into politics versus the corrupt Washington.
Right.
But they didn't use him at all this season. So I'm
Yeah.
hoping he comes back.
Well, one subplot that I did enjoy, and you touched on as well, was Claire with the military assault.
Right.
I thought that it was poignant, like you said. It was timely, but at the same time, I felt as though it pushed the story forward. And as we'll get into Claire in a little bit, it really helped us to see a different side of her character, because we know Claire is like ice cold, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But anyways, I did enjoy that portion of it. I felt like it built the story, built the world, and added things. What did you think about it?
The Claire subplot?
Yeah.
The military. Yeah. I thought it gave her a lot of sympathy. I thought it kind of explained a lot of her actions. It seems like all these adulterous characters, whether it's Mad Men or House of Cards, they seem like they always have some sexual thing they're dealing with in their past.
Right.
Don Draper, as his first sexual encounter as a boy was with a prostitute in a brothel, and that's why he womanizes, or they try to say that.
Yeah.
And so you see that Claire's been having this affair with the photographer that that almost sinks them entirely in their political career, thanks to Remy, which is another cool supporting character working for Raymond Tusk. But yeah, so I thought it gave a little motivation to her character, and I thought it made us really sympathize with her. But at the same time, she's ruthless too. I mean, Claire,
definitely.
She's like the Lady Macbeth of the show. That's what Robin Wright told me, is she modeled it after Lady Macbeth, in terms of it's almost like this power couple, her and Frank, and until the very end of season 2, you don't see much romantic contact between them at all. There's even I remember a shot behind the couch, and they're both sitting there, but there's no arm around her. Right. They're not kissing. It's like they're just mutual, benefiting off the power couple political status.
Exactly. I think to end out the supporting characters, I really enjoyed the barbecue shop owner, Freddie Hayes.
Yeah.
And then, as you touched on, the photographer, Adam Galloway. I thought that they did a great job of in rounding out their characters, but at the same time, it was kind of like they both kind of had that walk off into the sunset, but more so showing that if you're in close proximity of the Underwoods, like, it doesn't matter whether, in the case of Freddie, they had a good relationship where so much so that,
it's like
Frank
his
would,
escape.
And Frank would actually go to his house to say, listen, I'm sorry to say this, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But it was cool to just to see the demise of that relationship. And you could tell it was one that, again, Frank didn't want to give up. All right, let's quickly just get into the main characters. Okay. I guess first off, we can talk about Robin Wright's performance. Obviously, I think she really steals the show. Like you were saying earlier, I kind of liken her to Bonnie and Clyde, like 1967, Warren Beatty, Faye Dunaway, in the sense that she's in control. You know what I mean? Like, she is that solid rock behind Frank.
Oh, yeah.
And granted, Frank is just as ruthless, but I feel like, who knows where like later seasons go.
Oh yeah.
But I could see her doing some major damage. So what do you think about Robin Wright? And it's the other thing, it's hard to believe that she's Jenny from Forrest Gump. Like, seriously?
You didn't say it right. It's Ginny.
Jenny.
Yeah, and the Princess Bride.
Right.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And I've always loved her from I mean, we grew up on watching Robin, right?
Yeah, I had
and
a
then
crush
she had
on Jenny.
Oh, of course, everyone did.
Yeah.
Even though she used Forrest, man.
Yeah,
Although
man.
she gave him Forrest Jr. Haley Joel.
We're
She
digressing.
birthed Haley Joel Osment. All right, back
Okay,
up.
go.
All right. But yeah, so I love. She kind of fell off the map for a while in terms of like her career. She was married to Sean Penn, and they've since split. And it's great that since that split, she's really taken off. She won the Golden Globe, and I remember her sprinting to the stage to accept the award.
Right.
And she's a major player in it again, and I love it. I like that you mentioned the Bonnie and Clyde thing because that just got me thinking. In Bonnie and Clyde, there's this subtext that Clyde is impotent and can't get it up. They even Arthur Penn has their gun facing downward on the bed.
Right.
Go look at it.
Right.
And so in this case, it's almost like Claire. It's again the same thing. Whereas Frank's, I think he's closet homosexual. I mean, there's hints in both seasons, both in season 1 with his buddy at the college. They do the overnight in the library.
Right.
And then this season with the threesome that made a lot of people go, whoa.
Yeah, like I was like, where did that come from?
Yeah. But I think I think that connected to his buddy in the library. That's the only glue that I can see.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's a little digression, but I do think that she is really kind of pulling the strings in a way.
Right.
And I think that she's going to take a larger role. Like when we did before the season started, I did a House of Cards like with a card deck, and I did the president as the ace and Frank as king, but I put her as queen because she's going to rise. I can almost see her like running a campaign against him or something.
Right.
Husband
Taking
versus
over.
wife, yeah, man.
Exactly. But so Kevin Spacey as Frank Underwood, I mean, he definitely, I mean, like you said, like he's done everything in film. Like we're talking about in the history books, we study this in film class, some of his roles. And so now he takes on Frank Underwood, which on one hand, being from South Carolina, sometimes I hate that drawl that's so stereotypical. But I do think like he plays this amazing, captivating character that even when he breaks the fourth wall and looks, into you, like, that's part of the fun. Like, I can't wait for him to, break the fourth wall and say something. So what do you think about his portrayal?
I think that's what makes his character so fascinating. Yeah, there's the corruption and the Southern drawl and everything, and it has that narration that it's not quite noir, but, it's something that you couldn't say to a person. It would sound corny, but when it's narrated to the direct address to the audience, I don't know, it's juicy and it's, it's almost hard-boiled dialogue in a way.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the genius things. Fincher directed the first few episodes, and David Fincher of Social Network. And I think they really brilliantly weave in the direct address because sometimes it'll be just straight talking to you, but sometimes it'll be a glance. It'll be, he's subversively talking to another politician, and then it'll just be like, and then he'll look back. But you know that he's conning the person because he's let us in on his world, and then we're back. And Fincher also does a good job of bringing the text messages, allowing them to pop up on the screen. I'd never, I'm sure it'd been done before, but I'd never seen it in the show done like regularly.
Yeah. I think that's something that's kind of happening a lot more now. And it's cool to see that, again, the modern world is incorporating itself into films like Fruitvale Station, he texts and things like that. And so, like you said, it's really cool to see that because instead of like before where we actually had to look at the phone, like
some
instead
static
of just
shot.
Exactly. It just pops up on screen. And because we're a cell phone texting nation, like we understand, we can keep moving with it.
And for a while, screenwriters actually, even for a while, there was a period there in the last like 10, 20 years where we lived in the digital world, but screenwriters almost shied away from it and tried to find ways. I know we've written screenplays before where it's like, how do I make him forget his phone at home so I don't have to deal with that logic thing of, why didn't he just call 911 in this situation? It's like this whole new thing a challenge that screenwriters didn't have to deal with back in the golden age. You could be off on this night journey in your character and you couldn't just pick up and call the cops. Now you can. So for a while, people shied away from it, but I'm glad to see a show embrace it, and I think popping up on the screen is a way to do that. You can it's almost like reading subtitles in a foreign film yet still watching the action. You can almost communicate two things at once.
Right.
So instead of shying away from it, we've totally embraced it and added a layer.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Definitely. So I guess the last kind of question is, House of Cards obviously is kind of like, it's almost like the Redskins for us, right? Because it's like in our backyard. It's up in Baltimore. It's, it's our home team, So what do you think about in terms of House of Cards season 3, like making sure that it comes back to Baltimore? Do you have any thoughts on that? Or?
Well, it seemed for a while, it seems like it's coming back. I mean, for a while they kind of held it ransom and said, unless you give us more tax credits, we're going to go elsewhere.
Right.
And then Maryland lawmakers signaled that they're going to, allow them to stay. Although there's a whole controversy of where that money's going to come from. There's I have it here. It's the Special Fund for the Preservation of Cultural Arts, where some of the money's it might take away from other local, filmmakers. Although the general exposure of having such a huge show on the map, maybe that outweighs and justifies the means, where maybe that will allow more local people to work on the show.
Yeah.
And I think it was something about like $250 million boost to the economy, 6,000 jobs. So, some of those might be local crew members. Some are probably imported from LA. So you could argue that it's taking away from local, funds, but at the same time, it might be employing local crew. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I both know people that have worked on the show in some kind of way. So, and I'm not just saying like a person, like we know people that, and so it's helping to feed families and, pay bills. So
yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of people. I mean, a lot of people might not know this, but there's people that live in DC, are established, and whenever a big production comes to town, they work on it. Like, Lorenzo Milan did sound mixing for the entire Wire, or Donnie Eros did gaffs all the time. But they're local people,
right?
But they're high quality. These are top-notch, legendary shows. So I mean, there's a pool of people that exist in this area that get called to work. So it's not exactly everything's being imported.
Right.
The actors a lot, but you'll be talking to some local actors that are getting. That's a teaser.
Exactly. Well, Jason, thanks again, of course. As always, I mean, you are a friend to the show. Anytime you want to sit in this seat, you can sit there. How can people reach you and find Jay Frey above the Jay Frey?
Well, I'm on my reviews air Friday mornings on WTOP at 40 past the hour on the odd hours. So you can hear that, and then there's web pieces to go along with them that are much longer than the minute on-air piece. So if just because you hear the on-air piece, you might want to go check out the web piece, because I'm starting doing some video reviews on there too. A lot of cool stuff.
I saw some of
and you can follow me on Twitter at JFrey WTOP. That's the nickname around the office, JFrey. And I also run a film appreciation website called thefilmspectrum.com, where it's mostly in-depth reviews of classic movies. Like we just went into Bonnie and Clyde and All the President's Men. I love it, because to me the great thing is time is being erased. You can pull up anything on Netflix. You can pull up Bonnie and Clyde as fast as you can House of Cards.
Exactly.
There's no time anymore.
Yeah,
so I love it.
Well, Jason, thanks again for coming on the show, man. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Erin Essenmacher from Women in Film and Video, and you're watching Picture Lock.
This audience first met Kimberly Skyrme on the Women in Cinema panel episode. Ms. Skyrme is back to talk about her experience as a casting director over the past 23 years in films like True Lies, Clear and Present Danger, Traffic, and more. We'll also talk to her about her casting company and her recently completed Baltimore casting on the award-winning Netflix original series, House of Cards. Kimberly, welcome back to the show.
Great to be back. Thanks,
I'm so glad to have you back. We definitely had a fun time on the Women in Cinema episode, as we laughed about earlier. So I always like to start at the beginning. When did you first fall in love with film?
Well, fortunately, I had parents who loved movies and grew up in a small town. So what else can you do when you grow up in a small town but go to see movies on the weekend? So we could have been film critics back then. So it was certainly, growing up as a kid, we went to movies all the time.
Nice.
Even to the point that I loved them so much that in the middle of the night, my mom woke me up one night and said, "Oh my gosh, you have to come downstairs. 3 days of the Condor is on." So here I came trundling down, as a teenager. That, and also the original Out of Towners, which was fantastic. So those are two favorites that I got to see in the middle of the night. So I loved it so much I got up in the middle of the night to watch movies.
That's awesome. All right, so how did you get into casting, and did you always know you wanted to be a casting director? Because to me, I feel like, and we'll talk about this a little bit, but casting is something that is almost behind the scenes that people don't really realize how important it is to the overall film. So how did you get into it?
Well, fortunately, it was quite by accident. I do have a college classmate to thank for that. She interviewed for a job in Washington, D.C. and said, oh, you know, I have my master's. They don't pay very much. Maybe you want to go interview for the job in case I don't want it. But I got hired. So I have to thank her for that, because here I am 23 years later with a career in casting. But I had studied acting in college, but really preferred directing and producing. So I think that kind of artistic directing side that I really enjoyed in college became a perfect fit with my love of acting and then my love of directing.
Right.
And now I got to, you know, put the two together and ultimately get other people jobs. So I think that just as me as a person outside of my work, I like to facilitate people's success. So now I got to do all three things in my nice, wonderful career.
Yeah, you know, that's kind of cool and interesting that you say that, because I too, in high school, I was in theater, thespian, all that good stuff. But then when I went to college, I just felt like I didn't have enough of the drive to continue with the acting, but I realized that actually getting behind the camera as a director, you actually get to tell the story, you know, and so that kind of fascinated me. So we talked a little bit about how you as a casting director in our Women in Cinema episode are really able to pull the talent and to pick and kind of choose who we actually see on screen. So what is it about that excites you, as well as getting that great chemistry between actors? I'm sure that's like a hard thing to do. How do you figure that out?
Well, I think first that chemistry is an interesting point that you bring that up. That's the first piece of chemistry, is really between the casting director and the director. So that as you get to know that person, you kind of understand how they want to collaborate with you, and you know, over the years you'll kind of cultivate a really nice relationship with them. So it's creatively figuring out what it is that they want, or perhaps what they don't want, so you can introduce new things. So I think that artistic piece of it, that I consider myself as an artist and I'm using faces and people to paint the canvas instead of actual paint. So I think by having that artistic bent to it, then you can kind of see that inherent relationship between different actors, and knowing them and knowing their personalities, you can start to weave, you know, an amazing fabric with people.
It seems almost like, it's almost like a psychology as well that goes into the thought process. I'm just fascinated because, you know, it like I said, it really is key to a film's success. So is that part of it as well, or?
Well, I think so, because it is, again, I preferred directing and producing in college, even though I was studying acting, and I think telling the story and maybe finding a new way to tell it, that if the director's thinking he wants a man, but you introduce a woman, or perhaps they don't necessarily specify a character type and you introduce somebody that's maybe kind of wacky and offbeat, and you're just finding new creative ways to tell a story. So I think that is a part of it that I am drawn to, and there is a psychology behind that, and I did have a lot of psychology classes in school also. So I think there is that, because you can, by putting in a different character, tell a different story. I was just in the green room telling a story about how I gave somebody, you know, new sides to read, and he came, as I came back out, said to me, are you sure? I mean, this is a scene for a drug dealer, because he had originally been there reading for a dad, and I said, I know. So act like a drug dealer, because I know you can do it. So I think it's actually challenging people to do things that they don't even necessarily think they can do themselves, because you see it in them. Or Catalina, who will be on the show later, wouldn't typically be cast as a Secret Service agent, but we needed female Secret Service agents for House of Cards, and so, you know, I said, great, go do it. Oh, okay. And, you know, then people can pull things off. So it's seeing in people what they don't even see in themselves, or putting in front of a director people that they didn't think could actually pull something off.
Yeah. So. What do you think is one of your most favorite or memorable casting that you've done that, like we're talking about, it was just that perfect mixture?
Well, I think for sure one that I mentioned when I was on the Women in Cinema panel was, who's become a dear friend, Elizabeth Noon, who's an actress that typically people think of her as doing voiceover work, because she's, you know, quite prolific in all of the work that she's done in that arena, but I know her as an actor. And on Hearts in Atlantis, the director was interested in having, you know, some 25-year-old hookers, and described them, and he said, but I think I might like her to have a great voice. And then I suggested, well, I know this woman who's in her 50s though, but she has a really great voice. So fortunately, in the end, all the 25-year-olds that came were not cast, and Elizabeth was. So, you know, it's just finding that little hook that her voice made her so much more interesting than his original image. So you were able to actually change his mind and say something interesting about older women taking on roles that we wouldn't think that they would have. And then actually another local filmmaker, Joe Talbot, on a film that I produced and cast for him many, many years ago, that there was these 4 guys who lived in a group house, and he had very specific, kind of archetypes of guys who lived in the house. And this one great actor used to live here, Andy Rappaport, was really quirky, kind of a London punk music guy, as opposed to the character that Joe had described at all. And he couldn't come to callbacks, and I said, well, did you need to see other people? How do you feel about that? And he said, he's not at all what I wanted, but just book him. So, here I totally changed his mind, and it created an entire different dynamic of the group. And in the end, that particular role wasn't the most well-written of all of them, but he was the most interesting on camera because he was just an interesting actor.
Right.
So the actor then, in that case, really brought this least written character to life.
Okay. So you started your company in 1993, correct? And as we said in the panel episode, you've been DC based since, right? So can you talk a little bit about your company and then also what it means, as we were talking about, House of Cards, to be in the local DC metropolitan area in this market?
Well, I think it's actually been really wonderful because most people in casting, if you're in a bigger market, they've ended up being forced to pick either commercials or industrials or features, just the grind of the work there, that they really can't venture out much. And by starting here, and my first 3.5 years at Central Casting, I learned a great deal, but I think my interest in acting and being an artist as a casting director was very different from, kind of the culture at a big company. So I ended up leaving in 1993 and fortunately was working out of town on True Lies, but I came back to, I don't even remember which actor it is, had my home address to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, maybe it was even thousands of pictures. So then I thought, well, I studied acting. I could probably act like a casting director who has a company. So here I am 23 years later doing that. So I think fortunately by starting here and staying here, because I've learned to cultivate the actors, and I certainly do travel and work other places, but it's a great home base. And I've been able then to work in industrials, to work in features that come to town, to work on independent films, to work with extensively at American University on a film and video program that they had for many summers. They would shoot a short film. So you got to actually really teach people about the process of filmmaking and work there too. So I think it's been an amazing place to learn and stay, simply because there's the variety that, currently I'm working on a couple of commercials as well as an independent film, and I'm casting and producing myself a period film and a period series. And, so there's a whole host of things that it's very diverse, which again, as an artist, you want to be doing different things.
Right.
So it keeps it fresh for me.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It seems like, with doing the commercials, industrials, features, all these different things, it's something exciting, and I can tell you enjoy waking up to do this, right?
I do, fortunately. Most people do not say 23 years later they still love their job. Occasionally I'm tired. I think I probably in the last 3 days I've had maybe 6 hours of sleep total.
Wow.
But I still, love what I do, and it's great, and I'm having fun doing it.
Right. Well, that's awesome. So House of Cards was obviously a revolutionary in its being only online web television series. Can you talk just a little bit about your experience with House of Cards? I know you were with season 1 and season 2. So what's your experience been like?
Yeah, fortunately, I worked very briefly on season 1. A dear friend of mine was the producer's assistant, and so I was introduced to them in that way, and then just was involved in some other projects myself at the time, and was then available to work on season 2. And again, there's so many wonderful local actors here, and I watched the first season and thought, wow, there should be more familiar faces on this show. Right. And so fortunately, we went from locally probably 20 roles on season 1 to over 60 on season 2. So that was, kind of pounding the pavement and having an amazing staff that I worked with who was able to help me get a lot of people in so we could get some really competitive audition tapes that were now going up against people in New York and Los Angeles. And so they were very competitive, and we had over 60 in season 2. And hopefully in season 3, if we get those tax incentives approved in the state of Maryland, that we'll have even more in season 3. So it was really a great opportunity. I think it's a very interesting show, and you've got some diverse characters. You've obviously got a lot of politicians, but then we've got military types, and fortunately, not to be a spoiler alert, but we've got interesting people who came from Freddie's Neighborhood that was a new introduction to people that we were casting, and a whole contingent of Secret Service people, and so it was just a diverse group of people that we were able to cast and get roles for.
So what was the audition process like for
Well, a show like that was very different for me. I'm very used to being hands-on and sitting and working with the directors and actually auditioning them and being able to talk through it. And the nature of that show was videotape only. So everybody had to come in and audition for me, which the luxury was only the good takes went out and they didn't have to have a director seeing them fumble through things because I only sent out the best takes. But so that was new that I was only sending off videotapes to a director. But in the end, I guess I started to understand that creative process, that really all we do see is them in a little box. So if you're only seeing them on the little box, you're kind of buying exactly what you are looking for.
Right. Yeah, that's true. So I guess we were kind of talking, you were talking just a little bit about season 3 coming back. And I know you had talked about it on the prior episode. So what is it, and maybe you can just break it down for people at home, like what's going on right now with the legislature. And obviously we were talking before just about how today they actually were voting. So
well, while I won't pretend to be a political aficionado, however, I was asked by the Maryland Film Coalition to go speak in front of the Senate and was able to really be the people component of the speakers that were coming to testify and say this is a really worthwhile incentive and you should pass it. And it went back to the House and they're actually voting today. So we should hopefully know tomorrow. But for people who don't know, as a producer, obviously you have to go where the best situation is financially for your project, and by having incentives it encourages people to come here and spend their money here because they're actually getting this incentive to be here. So as residents of a state that have an incentive and as politicians of a state, they really should pass these things because they're creating spending for people who don't live here and are coming in, but it's also creating jobs and good economics for the people who work in the film industry, but for the people who own, the lumber company and the paint company or the restaurant that's around the corner from the apartment building or the hotel that people from out of town are staying in. I've had the good fortune to travel on some shows, and for example, in the Pelican Brief, I was in New Orleans for 4 weeks. You do work so much that the only thing you can do when you're not working is shop and eat, which means money that you're spending in a place where you don't live. So by having people come in from out of town, which there is a few, they're renting homes, hotels, and then they shop and eat. So even just in a very small way, people from out of town are having an economic impact, but then the people locally, if it's the dentist or if it's the doctor who come out one day, do some extra work on House of Cards and then think, oh, this might be fun. Maybe I should get into acting. They start taking acting classes and they'll get headshots taken. And so now in small ancillary ways, it's now a Maryland resident who happens to be a headshot photographer who's now making some money off all these new people getting headshots. Or that person who really wants to now pursue this career in acting is obviously taking acting classes. Again, another resident in a very small way who's entrepreneur is making some more money. So I think it's just a great economic impact in the area and adds a little prestige to the state. So any state that's doing it, that's why they're doing it.
Right. I think you broke that down perfectly.
Okay,
I can't say anything else or add to that. That was excellent. Okay. So just in terms of any maybe aspiring casting directors that are listening or watching, what would you suggest? What advice would you give to that younger person out there? Or even better, what would you tell yourself if you could talk to yourself 23 years ago?
Wow, good question. Well, I think it's a job that's very creative, it's very maternal, and it's very logistical. So you have to work on all sides of your brain, I think, because you're cultivating people and trying to help them succeed. And it's a very tricky business. I mean, most people go on job interviews, and the majority of the time you do hear yes and get hired. Well, the life of an actor is that for every 90 times you go out on that job interview, you're typically hearing no. So if you're not in a position to really encourage people to do well and be very caring and nurturing through that audition process, I think it's probably not the job for you, although many people do, from what I hear, are certainly not as nurturing as me and have been doing the job just as long. But I think you have to understand that piece of it. And you do have to be creative because you have to think outside the box. I mean, I've explained the stories where I heard 25-year-old female and I'm saying a 50-year-old female, or I've heard men and I'll suggest women. So I think you need to be creative and be really comfortable in your creative choices to, have a dialogue with a director, even, if you don't think it's within your bounds, but feel confident about your creative choices to share them and collaborate. And then just logistical, it's a lot of details. A lot of details to keep track of, scheduling and just all the details, and it goes into setting up an audition and keeping track of people so that you know where to find them and how to find them, and just working through all that. So a lot of time management.
You're working all sides of your brain here.
Yes, which keeps me nimble.
Yeah. Okay, so what are some of the things that you're currently working on now? I know you said Madam Secretary. If you can talk about it,
I do believe I can. Madam Secretary, they just shot actually one day here in D.C. It was a pilot that they're shooting in New York and just came down to D.C. for a day because it is a D.C.-based story, obviously, with the name Madam Secretary. And we're hoping that that pilot would get picked up and come back to D.C. It's a great economic impact, again, for not something filming in Maryland, but actually in D.C. their plan is that they would love to be able to come back and at least be a DC-based show that's coming to DC and not just filming about DC.
Right.
So that was great. And then with Charles Street Films in Baltimore, they're working on a project for the University of Maryland, University College. So a commercial to educate people on, going back and getting an online degree, as well as did some additional casting on Colonial Williamsburg commercial spot. Nice. And then, as I mentioned, there's a feature with a Baltimore-based writer-director that I'm working with, and then I have a friend who is a prolific writer, and we've done a lot of history or research on a historical figure, Alice Guy Blaget, who is the first female filmmaker and has 1,000 films to her credit, and a lot of people don't know who she is. So we have a feature about her, and then through that research have come up with a series that was kind of in and around that time as well. So those are just a few of the things. Those are the high points.
That's a lot. No wonder you only got 6 hours of sleep in the past 3 days. That's a lot. Wow.
Life is to be lived, and I'm living it.
Right. I guess we'll sleep when we're dead, right?
Exactly. So. My favorite saying.
Exactly. Okay. So, I'm sure there are many actors that might be watching or listening, want to get in contact with you. How can people get in contact with you or submit to your company?
Well, 2 great ways. Kimberly Skyrme Casting is the website, and there's also a Kimberly Skyrme Casting Facebook page, which for sure, as soon as we hear about House of Cards Season 3, we'll be posting things there. So those 2 places. The Facebook page, a place to get some information, and the website has address and everything where you can send your pictures. And while I love electronic submissions, and I tell people to electronically submit all the time, as I said, I've been casting for 23 years, so I'm a little old school, and I still like those pictures so that I can actually touch them and see them. And so instead of sitting at your computer for so long just looking at images, I like to actually, put them out and look at people together. And, as you were saying, how do you find if people have chemistry together? Well, sometimes just looking at their pictures together is the start of it all.
Okay, great. Yeah, and this is way off topic, but
I love off topic.
I know. I'm old school as well in the sense that I don't like reading books on an iPad or anything. I just love to touch and highlight, this digital age. It's okay.
I still like the scripts too, and if people send them to me electronically, unfortunately the disconnect is that I need to then print it so I can read it, because I want to read, and then I make casting notes, and if I think of a person, or just keep them tracked, even the characters that I do need to cast.
Right.
So I like the hard copy.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Kimberly, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Thank
Definitely
you.
You're a friend here. Anytime you want, come on.
Great. Well, I, of course, have lots of things to talk about when it comes to creativity and casting, so happy to come back.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll take a short break and be back with 2 local actors who you probably saw if you watched House of Cards Season 2, Lamont Easter and Catalina Parks. Stay tuned.
This is Hamilton Whitney, founder of FilmHamster.com, and you're watching Picture Lock.
You're watching a special House of Cards episode of Picture Lock, where we focus on film. My next guests are local DMV actors who you may have seen on the Underwood Secret Service detail. Lamont Easter and Catalina Parks, welcome, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
My pleasure. So one of the questions I always love to ask is beginning. So how did you all first get into acting, and when did you first fall in love with acting? I'll ask you first.
Well, I am originally from Colombia, South America, not South Carolina or Maryland.
That's where I'm from, actually, Columbia, South Carolina. So that kind of comes up to, I get it.
Yeah, but I'm way South America.
Right.
So I actually started acting 10 years ago when I was living in Atlanta. And I started as a commercial print model and also a hand model.
Nice.
And my agent started sending me to castings for commercials, industrials, and I wanted to be more prepared. So I started taking classes and to know what I was doing. And I started booking work, and I really liked it, and I just fell in love with it. And I started taking it seriously and began taking acting classes. And then I moved to this area about a year and a half ago, and I'm really happy with this market. I can't complain at all.
Wow. All right, Lamont, how about you?
Well, for me, it was a relatively recent beginning for me. It was really by accident. I had a coworker at work, Anastasia, and she would always send me these emails about, you know, open casting calls and you should do a reality TV show and so on. And I would ignore these emails, and she would keep sending them and keep sending them. So one day I came back from vacation. I had 500 emails to go through, and I was going through them, and there was one for House of Cards, a casting call in D.C. at a restaurant. And I said, oh, Tessie, it's too late. It was a week ago. She said, no, look at the bottom. It said, send a picture if you can't make it. So I said, okay, I'm going to humor her this time. I'll send a picture. 2 days later, I'm in the barbershop getting a haircut. Phone rings, and lo and behold, it's casting. We'd like for you to come in and participate. And that's kind of where it began. And I did a few more episodes, just some background, and I was like, this is great. And they're actually paying you. And so I started to take it as I progressed and started to work a little bit more, doing print ads and commercial. Now I'm consuming every workshop, acting class I can find time to do, and really moving forward from there.
Yeah, and you know, it's always one of those things that I love when people are finding the thing that they're passionate about and the thing that they love to do. And I know, Lamont, we were talking earlier in the green room about how this is something that you wake up and it's like you said, like, man, I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this. So that's a great thing. As actors in the DC market, a lot of times, you know, people might ask, you know, oh, can I really succeed here? Do I need to go to LA or New York? What do you all think in regards to that? Catalina, you're shaking your head, so let's start with you again.
Well, actually, I think this area, it's wonderful. DC is a very unique market. It's totally different from any other market. It's very interesting, and it's a small market, but there's so much work. There's a lot of government commercials and corporate videos. I do a lot of Spanish voiceovers too, and print work, and a lot of independent productions are here, and also big productions like House of Cards. And I'm really surprised and happy that I moved.
Right.
I mean, I really like it.
I agree. I have found so much work. I'm constantly working. I'm actually having to turn down some opportunities. Wow. There is that much work. Industrials, print, commercial. I think it's an incredible market. So there's plenty of opportunity here.
Yeah, and that's great to hear. Especially, I know a lot of people, like I said, just feel like, oh, I have to go to LA to do this. And for me, as a critic and a director, I know a lot of my friends would have actually gone out to LA or have gone to New York. But it's something about this market that I do feel, you know, it's where it's at. And in many ways, it's like being a fish in a medium-sized pond versus like being a minnow over in the ocean, you know, like in LA or New York. So I definitely love it here. So what are some of the ways that you all keep your careers diverse? Obviously, you were just kind of talking about how you have industrials, commercials. So what are some of the projects that you guys have been working on? Lamont, let's start with you.
Well, Catalina and I seem to be a Secret Service team here lately. We both have done work as agents on House of Cards. I've done work on Veep as POTUS Secret Service. Catalina and I just recently did a shoot for Yale University on Tranquility as a Secret Service team.
Oh, wow.
That was pretty cool. And then we just both recently shot on Madam Secretary, a new pilot for CBS just last week as Secret Service. So we seem to be teaming up, partnering.
Yeah, and we're going to be in a Western together too.
Yeah. So there's plenty of opportunities. It's amazing, certainly with women in film and video. A lot of opportunities for independent films. Just wrapped on one yesterday myself on another one. So there's all kind of diverse opportunities.
Yeah.
Right.
I really I would recommend for people to join all the organizations. These industry groups are wonderful, like Lamont say, Women in Film and Video. There's also TIVA, Television and Internet Video Association,
Right.
and Actor Center. And all these groups, they have all these networking events. They have a very active online community. They have parties, events, casting calls, and it's been wonderful for me because I'm new to this market that I was able to find these groups. So I would say stay connected, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's one of the things about DC that's really awesome is that there's so many different ways to network. But it's one of those things that when you actually get out there, the world just gets really small, you know, like I guess kind of like you guys are saying, like you're actually working together a lot on these things, and I'm sure you don't go in there holding hands like, hey, we're here to audition together, but it just so happens that
you see the same faces over and over again.
Right.
You see on each different, it's a totally different set and environment, but it's the same crew. And it's amazing to me. I find it so amazing how big the industry is, but how small of a family it seems to be, because you see the same people over and over again.
Right. So getting into House of Cards, you all were both on the Underwood Secret Service detail. So what was it like, Lamont being under Frank Underwood and Catalina being under Claire? What was that experience for you guys?
For me, it was really great. I remember my first time working with Kevin and Michael Kelly. We were at the Annapolis State House, and the first AD put me on my mark, and Kevin, they called out for first team to come out, and Kevin and Michael Kelly came out, took their places, and Kevin looked at me and noticed he hadn't worked with me before, and you are? And I said Lamont Easter, and shook my hand, and then Michael said, I'm Michael Kelly, and then we took off and did the scene. And that was really cool. That was a highlight for me on that particular day.
I think it's just a privilege to be on set with such great actors. And I actually have a funny story about the casting process because it was all thanks to Kimberly. I went to audition for a different role, and as I was leaving, she asked, oh, do you have a suit with you? And I'm like, no. And she's like, well, go get one. I think you will be perfect for Claire's Secret Service. So I go to the mall and buy me a suit, and it was really short. They didn't have my size, but that's all I could get. And it was really short and tight in the bottom, and I'm like, oh my God. So then I showed up and I'm like, this is what I got. And we made it work because it looked okay on camera. So then we did the audition, and then I had to go to Atlanta that weekend. So I was in Atlanta, and it's a Sunday, and I received an email from Kimberly. Well, Carl Franklin, the director for House of Cards, wants to interview you on Monday at 11 in Baltimore. So I had to drive all night long, 12 hours straight, no sleep, get home. I took a shower, drive to Baltimore to meet the director, and we made it. And that's where I met Lamont. And it was really, I'm glad I drove.
Now I know why you were standing up against that wall by herself, because she hadn't slept all night. Because I walked up, I said, you're going to make a great agent. You just have a great look. And that was one of the most interesting auditions even yet that I've been on, is Carl Franklin. He came out, and there were about 20 of us potential agents there, and Kimberly and Carl came out, and they kind of briefly spoke with each person, and asked you a few questions, and then they moved on. Then they went back and chatted, and both Catalina and I were blessed to be two of the ones that were selected.
It's
so
a
that was really
blessing.
cool.
It is a blessing. And you know what's the coolest part after all that? I mean, everything is wonderful, but it's like we got to be trained by a real Secret Service agent. He was Joe Russo, and he was the Secret Service agent for President Bill Clinton. So that was a privilege. We were like, oh my God. And he showed us how to stand, not to button your jacket because the gun, and where to put your badge, and always keep your hands here so they're ready to fight, to do something. and all these tricks that you have no idea
Yeah.
because you know.
It was pretty in depth. We went through all the weapons, the 6 Sawyers, how to do the motorcades, where the weapons are in the SUVs, and how to form your box around your principal. I mean, it was really in-depth training. They wanted to make it as realistic as possible without having real Secret Service agents. And so that was really cool, and comes in quite handy actually.
Man, what were and I guess Lamont, you kind of hit this, but what were memorable moments, either work ethic wise or just a good day on set?
Well, I tell you, for me, one thing is you spend a lot of time in holding, waiting for your scene to be shot, and you meet so many diverse actors of so many different skill levels, just great people. All the crew is just fabulous, and it becomes like a family unit. When you shoot a full season, you see the same people all the time, and it's almost when the season's over, it feels like family. Right. And so that's really unique for experience for me.
So
Yes.
So you guys were there for the entire season, like episode 1 through 13.
Absolutely.
That's incredible. That's an awesome experience.
It was many days, and the crew was really nice. And this is an industry where everybody takes a lot of pride in what they do. So everything is like they do their best that they can just to do everything, and it shows, and it was great.
Kimberly Skyrme's casting, her whole team, they're so helpful. They're so nice.
Yeah,
and
she comes to the I never seen that. She actually comes to the
shoots.
set and
Right.
just checks on you, and she's there.
But a memorable in season 2, one of the most memorable moments for me, spoiler alert, is at Camden Yards where we took over the Orioles baseball stadium for a scene, and I got to, as the lights went out, got to run out, and I grabbed Kevin's arm, and we run back into the bowels of the stadium, and I learned a couple of things. One, Kevin is very much in shape, and 2, he's very fast. It was tough keeping up with him with all the gun belt and everything on, but that was really great. And then a long scene at the infamous Civil War reenactment,
Right.
because we reported on set at 1 o'clock on Friday, and we wrapped 6:30 a.m. on Saturday.
Wow.
And you know what?
Overnight shoot.
After
Oh my
that scene,
goodness.
it was like I wrapped like at 3 a.m. and my car got stuck in the mud. So I was stuck in the mud, and they had to bring a tow truck to get me out. But it was actually a good thing because that sort of woke me up because I was tired, and then after that I was just like, oh, that's cool. And then
Because it was in Patapsco State Park, and it was supposed to be a dry shoot. And we were outside, and it decided to rain, and we were all parked in just this dirt lot. But by the time 6:30 a.m. rolled along, it was a mud pit. And they had tow trucks towing people's cars out.
Wow.
It was crazy. It was crazy. but-
Man, that's exciting. So and that was the scene that I recognized your face. I don't think we had met then, but I did. I was like at that Civil War reenactment thing. I was like, oh, that's
there.
Lamont. Yeah. So really quickly, how for the viewers and listeners, how can they find you? I'm sure as actors, you don't mind promoting yourself a little bit, Catalina.
Yeah, well, I have a website, catalinaparks.com. Right now it's under construction, but it will be up soon again. And you can email me at catalinaparks@aol.com.
All right, awesome.
And LamontEaster.com. Have a website. I'm available also on Facebook. On my website, I highlight some of the work I do, both voiceover, film, video, print, even a little hand modeling. So
Like George Constanza.
you name it.
Are my hands good enough to model?
I think so.
You think maybe?
Yes.
And drum set drummer, jazz musician.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank
It
you
was
for
awesome
having
talking
us.
with you guys.
All right.
All right, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Tia Day from Red One Entertainment, and you're watching Picture Lock.
That's all for this episode. I'd like to thank Jason Fraley for coming on and breaking down House of Cards Season 2 with me. You can hear Jason on WTOP Radio, where he does film reviews every Friday, 40 minutes after the hour on the odd hours. I thank Kimberly Skyrme for coming on and sharing her insights into what it means to be a casting director, and Lamont Easter and Catalina Parks for sharing their experience as actors. I have to thank my crew. Without them, this show would not be possible. And if you're in the film business in some kind of way and live in the DMV area, you know that House of Cards is not only a great show, but it's also a means of income for friends and neighbors. And as of this show, we'll know tomorrow whether season 3 is going to be here or not. So, crossing our fingers. You can find Picture Lock on Facebook and Twitter. Don't forget to check out picturelockshow.com for movie reviews, news, and if you're interested in being a guest on the show or in our studio audience. Be sure to subscribe to the mailing list on the site so that you can win free passes to upcoming screenings in the DMV area. Until next time, I hope you stay locked on film.